Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want you to start by visualizing a map.
Okay.
You know the standard world map you see in every classroom? And I want you to look at the Middle East and East Africa.
Right.
Specifically, zoom in on that long, thin strip of blue water separating them. The Red Sea.
Got it.
Now, usually when we look at that body of water, what do we see? I mean, we see a border, right?
We do. We see a divider, a jagged line that basically says Africa stops here and Asia starts there.
Exactly. Ethiopia on the left, Yemen and Saudi Arabia on the right. Two totally different worlds, two different continents.
That is certainly how modern geopolitics and, well, how our modern maps train us to see it. We have these rigid mental boxes.
Wait.
African history goes in this drawer over here, and Middle Eastern history goes in a completely different one.
And you never let them mix.
And rarely do we let them mix, no.
But the stack of sources we are diving into today, they take that map, they crumple it up, and they just toss it out the window.
They completely shred it.
They argue that for centuries, and specifically the pivotal centuries leading right up to the birth of Islam, the Red Sea wasn't a barrier at all.
Not even close. It was a superhighway.
A superhighway, that's a great way to put it. It was a bridge. It was almost like a lake connecting neighbors, not some vast ocean separating strangers.
And this creates a complete paradigm shift, you know? If you want to understand the origins of Islam, the sources are telling us very clearly you cannot just stare at the sands of Arabia.
You can't.
You have to look across the water. You have to look to the highlands of Aksum, to what is modern-day Ethiopia.
So the DNA, in a sense.
The biological, the political, and the spiritual DNA of early Islam is just deeply, inextricably intertwined with East Africa.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to trace a thread that starts way, way back with the mysterious Queen of Saba.
Sheba, as many people know her.
Right, Sheba. And it runs through some absolute, I mean, Game of Thrones level political drama in the 6th century. We're talking elephants and emperors.
Oh, absolutely.
And it ends up shaping the life of one of the most famous men in all of Islamic history, Bilal ibn Rabah.
And it is not just biography, is it? It is about survival. It's about the very existence of the Islamic faith in its earliest, most fragile moments.
How so?
We are going to see how that existence depended, almost entirely on the protection of an African Christian emperor.
It's an unbelievable story.
It is a story of how two shores were essentially acting as one single world.
So let's set the stage a bit. Our sources drop us into a very specific moment in time. We are in the late 6th century, roughly 570 CE.
The pivot point.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the text describes this era using a very specific and I think somewhat haunting term. It talks about a void.
The void is a fascinating concept. It's derived from the religious texts in our source material, and they describe this period as a gap of about 570 years.
A huge gap.
It's the interval between the time of Jesus Isa ibn Maryam in the tradition and the birth of the messenger Muhammad. The texts refer to this era as the Jahiliyyah.
Which usually gets translated as the age of ignorance, right? But when I read through the descriptions, ignorance feels like it's putting it very lightly.
It is.
It kind of implies they just didn't know how to read or write. But the sources, they paint a picture that is much, much grimmer than just a lack of libraries.
Significantly grimmer. It denotes a moral and a spiritual vacuum. The Arabian Peninsula at this time is described as a place of profound social decay.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, we are reading accounts of rampant idolatry, for one, but also endless tribal warfare where these blood feuds would last for generations, and some really, truly brutal customs.
Like what?
The sources detail things like female infanticide, the practice of burying infant daughters alive.
Just because they were girls.
Because they were seen as a shameful liability, a drain on resources. It's horrific to think about.
That is horrific.
It is. And crucial to our discussion today, the sources highlight a system of slavery that was dehumanizing in the extreme.
In what way?
Captives were treated, according to one analysis in the text, essentially as a subspecies.
So there was no concept of universal human rights or anything like that?
None whatsoever. You were your tribe. That was it. Your protection came from your bloodline. If you had no tribe or if you were enslaved, you were property.
An object.
An object to be used, sold, or broken.
So that is Arabia. It's chaos, it's tribalism, it's darkness, really. But if you stood on the shore of the Red Sea and looked across to the African side at that exact same moment, you saw something completely different.
Oh, night and day. You saw Aksum.
And what was Aksum?
Aksum was a powerhouse. We really cannot overstate this. While Arabia was fragmented into these squabbling tribes, Aksum was an empire at its absolute peak.
How big was it?
It controlled modern Ethiopia, Eritrea, Yemen, and even parts of Sudan and Saudi Arabia. It was centralized, it was sophisticated.
And it was Christian.
A Christian empire, yes, and closely allied with the Byzantine Romans.
So they were the heavy hitters of the region.
Absolutely. They controlled the flow of trade from the Indian Ocean all the way to the Mediterranean. Gold, ivory, incense, exotic animals. It all moved through Aksumite hands.
Like a global trading hub.
If you were a merchant in the 6th century, all roads, or maybe all sea lanes, led to Aksum.
So you have this massive, wealthy superpower on one side of the water and a fragmented, chaotic tribal society on the other.
A stark contrast.
And the best way to understand how these two worlds crashed into each other is to look at one person, a man who was physically the bridge between them.
Bilal ibn Rabah.
Let's talk about Bilal.
Bilal is the perfect starting point. He is the human embodiment of this Red Sea connection.
Most people who know Islamic history, they know Bilal as the first muaddin,
The man who called the prayer.
the man who called the prayer. But the deep dive into his background reveals so much more about why he was who he was. Let's look at his biology first, his origins.
His heritage is fascinating. He was born in Makkah right around that pivotal year we mentioned, 570 CE.
The year of the elephant?
The year of the elephant, which we will definitely get to. His father, Rabah, was an Arab, but his mother, Hamama, was an Aksumite, an Ethiopian.
Okay.
And the sources drop a detail about her that really changes how we view Bilal's tragedy.
She wasn't just a regular woman who was captured during a raid or something.
No. The sources suggest Hamama was a former princess of Aksum. She was royalty who had been captured during one of the geopolitical skirmishes between the empires and then forced into slavery in Makkah.
Wow. That adds such a layer of tragedy to it. I mean, Bilal has royal blood in his veins. He is the son of an Arab and an African princess, but he is born into slavery.
He's born into slavery because of the status of his mother. It didn't matter who his father was.
What does he look like? Do we know?
The text describes him as tall, dark-skinned, with a powerful build and a beautiful, resonant voice.
And he was known for being smart.
Very intelligent, yes. He had this striking appearance. But despite all his capabilities, his intelligence, his heritage, to the elites of Makkah, he was just a tool. He belonged to a man named Umayyah ibn Khalaf.
Umayyah.
Yeah.
This guy, I mean, reading the source material, he seems to represent everything wrong with that void era we just talked about.
He is the archetype of the Jahiliyyah chieftain. Arrogant, completely obsessed with status, and a fierce guardian of the idolatrous status quo.
So to him, Bilal wasn't a human being with a soul.
Not at all. He was an asset on a balance sheet, a piece of property.
Which makes Bilal's eventual conversion to Islam so incredibly dangerous for him. When the messenger Muhammad starts preaching in Makkah, Bilal is one of the very first to listen.
One of the very first.
What was it about the message that hooked a man in his position?
It was the concept of Tawhid.
The oneness of God.
The oneness of God. You have to imagine Bilal's position. He lives in a world of rigid, unchangeable hierarchy. The idols in the Kaaba reinforced that hierarchy. Some tribes were better, some people were masters, some were slaves. It was a kind of celestial caste system.
And then he hears this message.
Then he hears a message that says, no, there is only one creator. And in the eyes of that one creator, a slave and a king are equal. The only thing that distinguishes you is your piety.
That is a revolutionary idea. I mean, it is not just theology. It is a declaration of independence for his soul.
It was a universal truth that aligned with his very nature, with his fitra. But when Umayyah finds out,
The reaction is brutal.
the reaction is sadistic. It wasn't just punishment. It was a concerted attempt to break him psychologically.
The descriptions of the torture are just.
Yeah.
They're visceral. They take him out to the desert at noon.
The Ramada, the scorching heat of the Arabian midday sun. I mean, if you've ever been to the desert in Saudi Arabia, you know that the sand gets hot enough to literally blister your skin. It is lethal.
And they would throw him on that.
Umayyah would have Bilal thrown onto this burning sand, and then, to ensure he couldn't move or even breathe deeply, Umayyah would order a massive rock-like millstone size to be dragged over and placed on Bilal's chest.
Just crushing the breath out of him. Unbelievable.
The goal was to suffocate him into submission. Umayyah would scream at him, "Deny Muhammad, worship Allah and Al-Uzza, our old gods."
He wanted to hear Bilal submit to the idols, to acknowledge the old hierarchy.
That's right, he wanted him to break.
But Bilal doesn't scream. He doesn't beg. He just says one word.
Ahad.
Ahad. Now, I want to stop here because the linguistic analysis in our sources on this is fascinating. I always thought he was just saying one.
Right, there is one God.
Yeah, but he didn't use the normal word for one, did he?
No, and this is a critical nuance that, non-Arabic speakers might miss. In Arabic, if you want to count something, one apple, one book, one camel, you say wahid.
Okay, Wahid.
Wahid is the start of a series. One, then two, then three. It implies that there can be more. It's a number.
So Wahid is numerical.
Exactly. But ahad implies absolute uniqueness, indivisibility. It describes something that has no second, no partner, no equal. It cannot be divided or multiplied.
Wow.
So by saying ahad, Bilal wasn't just counting gods. He was making a profound theological argument while being tortured.
He's saying God is absolutely unique and unlike anything in your entire power structure.
That's it. It was the ultimate defiance. He was basically telling Umayyah, you can crush my body, but you cannot crush this truth. He was connecting himself to a power that made the rock on his chest feel light.
He was asserting that Umayyah was small and God was great.
Precisely.
And this standoff eventually leads to his freedom. Abu Bakr, the Prophet's close friend, he sees this happening day after day, and he decides to intervene.
He can't stand to see it anymore.
And the negotiation between Abu Bakr and Umayyah is really revealing about the economics and the values of the time.
It is a total clash of value systems. Umayyah eventually gives up on breaking Bilal. He realizes this slave is spoiled in his eyes because he won't submit.
So he just wants to get rid of him.
He decides to sell him. And he sneers at Abu Bakr, saying, I would have sold him to you for just 1 ukiah.
And 1 ukiah is what, about 40 dirhams?
It's about 40 dirhams, which is peanuts for a slave of Bilal's strength and skill. Umayyah is trying to devalue Bilal, to say, look, he is worthless to me. He is trash.
But Abu Bakr actually paid more.
He paid 200 dirhams, about 5 ukiah, and the source does a modern currency conversion here, which I love because it makes it so real. 200 dirhams is roughly $600 and $610 USD today.
A good amount of money.
A significant sum, yes, but not a fortune. However, Abu Bakr's response to Umayyah's taunt is the key. When Umayyah says, I would have taken 1 ukiah, Abu Bakr retorts, by God, if you had demanded 100 ukiah, I would have paid it.
100 ukiah, that is, what, 4,000 dirhams?
It's 4,000 dirhams. The modern equivalent is something like $70,000 USD.
$70,000.
Exactly. Abu Bakr is telling him, you look at this man and you see a broken slave worth maybe $30. I look at him and I see a brother in faith worth a king's ransom.
It just completely upends the social hierarchy of Makkah. It put a price tag on faith that a man like Umayyah couldn't even begin to comprehend.
He was speechless.
So Bilal is free. He joins the community. And now we get to the moment he is most famous for. The Muslims migrate to Medina. They are establishing their society. They can finally build a mosque, but they have a logistical problem.
A very practical problem.
How do you tell people it's time to pray?
They didn't have clocks or apps or PA systems, and they debated this fiercely. The sources list the suggestions, and it shows how they were trying to differentiate themselves from other communities.
Right. Some suggested hoisting a flag at prayer time.
But that's visual. If you aren't looking, you'd just miss it.
True. Others suggested a horn, like the Jewish shofar.
And then some suggested a wooden clapper or a bell, like the Christians used.
But the Prophet wasn't comfortable with any of those options. He wanted something distinct. He didn't want to just copy the neighbors.
He wanted something unique to their message. And the solution, it came via a dream.
A dream.
A companion named Abdullah bin Zayd. And significantly, the sources say Umar ibn al-Khattab also had the same vision, saw a man in green garments. In the dream, Abdullah asks the man, can I buy your bell? The man asks why, and Abdullah says, to call to prayer. The man replies, I have something better. And he recites the Adhan.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
The exact words, it's a summary of the faith. God is greater. I bear witness there is no God but God. Come to prayer. Come to success.
And it uses the human voice.
The most natural instrument there is.
So Abdullah runs to the Prophet. He tells him the dream. The Prophet validates it. He calls it a true vision. But, and this is the part I love, he doesn't tell Abdullah, okay, great, you go climb up on the wall and shout it.
No. He points to Bilal.
He points to Bilal.
He says, stand with Bilal and teach him what you have seen, for he has a voice more beautiful and louder than you.
I love that detail. It is not just about piety or who had the dream. It is about aesthetic beauty. It's about who had the best instrument for the job.
And think about the symbolism. The voice that was silenced under that rock, that could only wheeze ahad while being crushed,
Is now chosen to be the loudest voice in the city.
proclaiming that same truth over the rooftops 5 times a day. It is a total restoration of his agency. It is the ultimate vindication.
And his legacy just gets wilder from there. There's the Footsteps in Paradise story.
Oh, yes, narrated by Abu Huraira. After the Isra the night journey, where the Prophet ascended to the heavens, he comes back and he tells Bilal, Bilal, I heard the sound of your footsteps ahead of me in paradise.
Wow.
And he asks him, what special act did you do to earn this?
And you'd expect Bilal to say something dramatic. I survived torture, or I fought in the Battle of Badr, or I was the first muadhin.
Right, one of these big-ticket items. But he doesn't. He says with total humility, I did nothing extraordinary except that whenever I performed wudu, ablution, day or night, I prayed as much as was written for me.
So it was about consistency, just
Yeah.
a simple, quiet act repeated over and over.
It is the lesson of the deep dive into his life. Greatness in this tradition isn't about grand gestures or, ironically, about royal bloodlines, even though he had one. It is about internal consistency and connection.
So Bilal's the personal bridge. He's the human connection between Aksum and Islam. But now we need to zoom out,
We do.
because Bilal's life didn't happen in a vacuum. He was swept up in the currents of a massive geopolitical struggle. We need to talk about why there were Aksumites in Arabia in the first place.
We have to go back to the heavy history. We need to look at the grand chessboard of the 6th century.
So we mentioned Aksum was a trade hub, but they were also a military machine.
They were a serious military power. And in the early 6th century, the king on the throne was a man named Caleb. In the Christian tradition, he is known as Saint Elisban.
And Caleb is sitting in Aksum, looking across the Red Sea at Yemen, and he sees a problem.
He sees persecution. At the time, Yemen was ruled by the Himyarite kingdom, and the king there, a man named Dunuas, had converted to Judaism.
Okay.
Now, our expert source makes a really important point here. This wasn't necessarily just a spiritual conversion, it was deeply, deeply political.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, think about the alliances. If the two big bullies on the block, the Byzantine Empire to the north and the Aksumite Empire across the sea, are both Christian, and you want to maintain your independence in Yemen,
You can't be Christian too.
you can't. You would just be absorbed by them. You need a counter-ideology. Judaism provided Dunuas with a way to resist the Byzantine Aksumite axis. It was a declaration of sovereignty.
So it is like Cold War politics.
Yeah.
You're choosing your ideology to signal your alliance, or in this case, your independence.
It's a perfect analogy, but Dunuas takes it too far. He begins actively persecuting the Christian population in a city called Najran, which is in the south of Arabia.
And the sources are pretty graphic about this.
They describe trenches of fire. It was a massacre.
And Emperor Caleb hears about this and says, absolutely not. Not on my watch.
He can't let it stand. He launches a massive amphibious invasion. In 525 CE, Aksumite ships land in Yemen. They completely crush Dunuas's forces.
And just like that, Yemen becomes an Aksumite vassal state.
This is the moment Aksum becomes a true trans-regional empire, controlling both sides of that critical Red Sea gate.
But then, Caleb does something that I think would just never happen in modern politics.
Mm-hmm.
He wins, he conquers, he expands the empire to its greatest height, and then he quits.
It is astonishing. He abdicates the throne.
Why?
The sources say he was deeply moved by a spiritual advisor, an ascetic named Zenon. He apparently felt the spiritual weight of the blood on his hands from the war and wanted to atone.
So what did he do?
He sends his royal crown to Jerusalem to be hung in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and he retires to a monastery to live as a humble monk.
He trades the throne for a cell. That is a movie ending right there. But as we know from history, power vacuums are dangerous.
Very.
Caleb leaves, and things in Yemen get messy.
Fast.
Very messy. The Aksumite soldiers he left behind, the occupation force, they didn't like the guy Caleb put in charge as viceroy. They wanted one of their own.
Enter Abraha. Abraha. He is one of the most fascinating characters in this entire drama. The text describes him as a former slave, or maybe a low-ranking officer, who just climbed the ranks through sheer charisma and ruthlessness.
A real self-made man.
Absolutely. And he leads a coup.
A coup d'etat in ancient Yemen.
Exactly. He overthrows the viceroy Caleb appointed. Caleb, from his retirement, or maybe just before it, tries to send punitive expeditions to stop him.
And what happens?
The soldiers just defect to Abraha. They saw him as their general, the man who understood them. He was unstoppable. He declares himself the king of South Arabia.
So now you have Abraha ruling Yemen. He is technically Aksumite, but he has gone rogue. He is effectively independent.
And he is ambitious. He doesn't just want to rule Yemen, he wants to be the master of the entire Arabian Peninsula.
Which brings us to the famous Year of the Elephant.
This is where it all comes to a head.
Tabra has a strategy. He knows that money and power in Arabia are tied to pilgrimage. All the tribes from all over the peninsula, they go to Makkah to visit the Kaaba.
Right. Even though it was full of idols at the time, it was the economic and spiritual heart of the entire region. All roads led to Mecca.
Abraham looks at Makkah and sees a competitor.
A major competitor. So he decides to build a better mousetrap. He builds a magnificent cathedral in Sana'a, his capital in Yemen.
And it had a name.
It was called Al-Qilas. The sources describe it as just stunning marble, gold, mosaics, stained glass. He wanted to dazzle the Arabs. He wanted them to come to Sana'a instead of Makkah for their pilgrimage.
He literally wanted the tourist dollars.
Essentially, he wanted to shift the center of gravity of the Arab world from the Hijaz down to Yemen. But the Arabs, they were deeply attached to the Kaaba.
It was the house of Abraham.
Yeah.
You couldn't just build a fancy church and expect them to switch allegiances overnight.
Precisely. And then the insult happens.
The source is very graphic here.
It is. A man from the Quraysh, the tribe that ran Makkah, hears about Abraham's plan to replace the Kaaba. He gets incredibly angry.
So what does he do?
He travels all the way to Sana'a, sneaks into this pristine, beautiful new cathedral at night, and, well, he relieves himself in it.
He defiles it.
In the worst way. He smeared filth on the walls. It was the ultimate act of desecration.
Abraham must have absolutely lost his mind.
He was furious. But, again, let's look a little deeper. The experts in our source material suggest this was the excuse he had been waiting for.
The pretext.
The pretext. He already wanted to conquer Makkah and control those northern trade routes completely. This insult just gave him the casus belli, the perfect justification for war.
So he mobilizes, and this is not a small army.
It's a massive army. 60,000 men, and the tank of the ancient world, war elephants.
And the lead elephant even had a name.
Mahmud. The sources specifically name him Mahmud. This was a shock and awe campaign. The Arabs of the Hijaz had never fought against elephants.
It would be like bringing a tank to a knife fight.
Exactly. The psychological impact of seeing these massive beasts was intended to make the Arabs surrender without even putting up a fight.
So he marches north. He smashes through any Arab tribes that stand in his way. He gets to the outskirts of Makkah.
And the Makkans panic.
Of course. They look at this army and they know they cannot win. They run to the hills.
They abandon the city. They leave it completely defenseless. But there's this incredible meeting that happens right before the end.
What's that?
Abraham's men had stolen livestock from the outskirts of the city, including 200 camels belonging to a man named Abd al-Muttalib.
We know that name.
Yeah.
That is the Prophet Muhammad's grandfather.
He was the custodian of the Kaaba, the chief of the city. He walks into Abraham's camp to negotiate. Abraham is actually impressed by his bearing. He looks like a true leader.
So Abraham assumes he's there to plead for the city.
He asks him, through a translator, what do you want? Are you here to beg for your temple, to plead for your city?
And Abd al-Muttalib says,
I want my camels back.
just the camels.
Abraham is stunned. He says, I came to destroy your holy house, the center of your entire religion, and you are talking about livestock. I have lost all respect for you.
And then Abd al-Muttalib drops the mic.
He delivers one of the most famous lines in pre-Islamic history. He says, I am the lord of the camels. As for the house, it has a lord who will defend it.
The house has a lord. That is such a gamble. It's an incredible statement of faith. He takes his camels and just goes back to the mountains.
He leaves the door to the city wide open. It is absolute faith, or perhaps absolute resignation to the fact that humans could not stop this force.
Either way, the stage is set. Abraham orders the army to charge. They point Mahmud the elephant toward the Kaaba.
And he won't move.
He just freezes.
He kneels down. The handlers beat him with iron hooks. They poke him. He refuses to move toward the Kaaba. But, and the sources are very consistent on this, when they turned him back toward Yemen, he stood up and trotted.
No way.
Toward Syria, trotted back toward Makkah, knelt right back down.
He was like an invisible force field.
And while they are struggling with this stubborn elephant, the sky turns dark.
Oof, what?
Birds. Ababil. Flocks and flocks of birds coming from the direction of the sea.
And they're carrying something.
Each bird is carrying 3 stones, 1 in its beak and 2 in its claws. The text calls them stones of baked clay.
And these weren't just pebbles being dropped.
No. The description of the damage is horrific. The stones would cut through helmets, through armor, through bodies like a bullet.
Good heavens.
The sources liken the aftermath to a plague, specifically smallpox. The army didn't just die, they disintegrated. Their skin sloughed off their
It
bodies.
sounds like biological warfare from the heavens.
Abraham's army is decimated. He himself is hit, and he flees back to Yemen, his body literally falling apart as he rides, and he dies there.
And the Kaaba is saved. This year, 570 CE is forever known as the Year of the Elephant. And why does this matter so much?
Because in that same year, amidst the dust of this miracle, a baby is born in Makkah,
Muhammad ibn Abdullah.
the future prophet.
It is a total sliding doors moment in history. If Mahmud the Elephant charges, the Kaaba is destroyed, Makkah is sacked, the trade routes probably shift permanently to Yemen.
The city Muhammad was supposed to be born in ceases to exist as a functional society.
He would have been born into a refugee crisis or slavery or even death. Instead, he's born into a city that has just witnessed a divine intervention.
The psychological impact on the Arabs was massive. They knew this house is protected. It set the stage perfectly for the prophet's mission decades later.
So the prophet grows up, and the Aksumite thread, it just keeps weaving through his life. It wasn't just the elephant.
Oh, it is everywhere. His nurse, Iman, the woman who helped raise him, was Ethiopian. He grew up hewing her language, experiencing her culture
He would have interacted with Aksumite merchants in the markets of Makkah.
all the time. And the language thing is real, right? The Quran itself contains words that aren't originally Arabic.
Yes, this is fascinating. Scholars have identified roughly 200 words in the Quran that have roots in Ge'ez or Amharic, the languages of Aksum.
What kind of words?
Words often related to high religious concepts, like mishkat, which means a niche for a lamp, or hawariyun, the word for the disciples of Jesus. It shows that the spiritual vocabulary of the entire region was a blend of Arab and African.
So there's this constant cultural exchange happening.
Constant. So fast forward. The prophet is 40. He receives revelation. He starts preaching his message. And the people of Makkah, his own tribe, the Quraysh, turn on him.
The persecution was brutal. And by the year 615 or 616 CE, it was becoming life-threatening. The Muslims were being tortured, just like Bilal was.
And the prophet has to make a strategic decision. Where do I send my people to keep them safe?
He looks at the map. He doesn't send them to other Arab tribes. Too risky, too tribal. He doesn't send them east to Persia. He points west.
He points to Africa. He points to Aksum.
This is the first hijra. I think most people think the migration to Medina was the first one. But years before that, the very first refugees of Islam went to a Christian kingdom.
And he didn't just pick it randomly. He gave a reason.
So specifically, the prophet told them, "Go to the land of Habasha, which is Abyssinia Aksum, for there is a king there who does not tolerate injustice."
He trusted the character of the Christian king, the Negus. His name was Ashama ibn Abjar.
So a small group, about 12 men and 4 women initially, then more later, crossed the Red Sea. They were asylum seekers. They were completely vulnerable.
But the Quraysh weren't going to let them go that easily.
Not a chance. They sent a delegation to the Negus to demand extradition. They wanted to drag these Muslims back to Makkah.
This leads to one of the most famous courtroom dramas in history.
It really is. The Quraysh envoys bring expensive gifts, leather, furs. They're bribing the generals and the bishops.
And what's their argument?
They tell the king, "These are foolish youth who have abandoned our religion, and what's more, they have insulted yours. Hand them over." They were trying to drive a wedge between the Christians and the Muslims.
And the court, the generals, they agree with the Quraysh.
The generals tell the king to hand them over. But the Negus says, "No, I will hear from them first." He calls in the Muslims. Jafar ibn Abi Talib, the prophet's cousin, acts as the spokesperson.
And Jafar gives this incredible speech. He describes the ignorance they lived in, the immorality, and then how the prophet brought them to light, to charity, to truth.
And then the Negus asks the pivotal question. He says, "Do you have anything with you from what your prophet brought from God?"
He wants to hear the Quran for himself.
And Jafar reads Surah Maryam, the chapter about Mary and Jesus.
A brilliant choice.
Absolutely. He recites the verses describing the miraculous virgin birth of Jesus, describing him as a word and a spirit from God. The sources say the Negus wept until his beard was soaked. The bishops wept until their scrolls were wet with tears.
And then the Negus does something very dramatic. He picks up a stick from the floor.
He draws a line in the dust or holds up the stick and he says, "The difference between what you say and what Jesus said is not more than the thickness of this stick."
That gives me chills every time I read it. He recognized the same source, the same divine light.
He turned to the Quraysh envoys and said, "Go. By God, I will never hand them over to you. He gave the Muslims sanctuary. They lived there in peace for years.
And some sources even suggest the Negus secretly became Muslim later in his life.
Yes. When he died in 630 CE, the Prophet Muhammad, who was then in Medina, gathered the companions and performed the Salat al-Ghaib, the funeral prayer in absentia.
Which is very rare.
He never did that for any other foreign ruler. It confirms that the Prophet considered the African king a believer, a brother in faith.
So without Aksum,
Without Aksum, the early Muslim community could very well have been wiped out. The seed of the faith was preserved in African soil, while the plant was struggling to survive in the harsh Arabian soil.
it was the incubator for Islam.
It was.
That is a powerful image. Now, we have covered the torture of Bilal, the politics of Caleb and Abraham, the elephants and the refugees, but our sources, they want us to go back even further.
Even deeper.
They say this connection didn't start in the 6th century. It started thousands of years earlier.
With the queen.
The Queen of Saba, or Sheba.
In Islamic tradition, she is known as Bilqis. In Ethiopian tradition, she is Makeda. And the reason both cultures claim her is that her kingdom likely spanned both sides of the Red Sea.
So she herself was a bridge.
She is the common ancestor.
In her story, it mirrors everything we've talked about. She travels from her kingdom to meet Solomon Suleiman in Jerusalem.
It is another meeting of minds, a meeting of civilizations. And the Quran tells the famous story of the glass floor.
Right. Let's unpack that. What happens?
She enters Solomon's court. She looks down and sees what she thinks is a shimmering pool of water on the floor. And she instinctively lifts her dress so she doesn't get it wet.
But it's not water.
It's not water. Solomon tells her it is but a palace paved smooth with crystal.
It was an optical illusion.
It was advanced technology, but the metaphor is deeper. She thought she saw one thing, water, but the reality was something else entirely, glass. It was a lesson in looking past appearances.
And it has a profound effect on her.
She realizes that her sun-worshipping beliefs were surface level and that Solomon possessed a much deeper truth. And she says, I submit with Solomon to the Lord of the worlds.
And the Ethiopian tradition, the Kibra Nagast, takes us a step further, doesn't it? Biologically.
It does. It says she and Solomon married, and they had a son, Menelik III,
Who becomes the first emperor of Ethiopia.
the founder of the Solomonic dynasty. The tradition says Menelik visited his father in Jerusalem, and when he returned to Aksum, he established a parallel Jewish kingdom, bringing the Ark of the Covenant with him.
So the emperors of Aksum, including Caleb and the Negus who saved the Muslims, they all claimed direct descent from this union.
They saw themselves as the spiritual cousins of the Arabs and the Jews.
Which brings us full circle. The Bible's Table of Nations in Genesis connects Sheba, or Saba, to both the Hamitic line, the African line, and the Semitic line, the Arabian line. The ancient genealogy itself is a bridge.
It's built right into the foundational stories of all three faiths.
So when we step back and look at this entire deep dive, what are we really seeing? We started with a map that had a hard line down the middle.
And we have effectively erased that line. It's gone.
We have seen that you cannot understand the birth of Islam without understanding Africa.
It is impossible. From the very blood in the veins of Bilal to the military protection of the Negus to the spiritual vocabulary of the Quran itself, Islam wasn't an Arab event that later spilled over into Africa.
It was a Red Sea event from day one.
It was a conversation between two shores from the very beginning.
And I just keep thinking about that elephant, Mahmud.
It is the ultimate what-if of history, isn't it?
The source ended with this provocation. The house has a lord. But imagine if that elephant had taken just 3 more steps, if he had charged.
History is so fragile, it hangs by these tiny threads. One animal kneeling down changed the spiritual geography of the entire world for billions of people.
One king deciding not to extradite a few dozen refugees preserved a faith.
One slave whispering Ahad instead of giving up became a global symbol of resilience.
And today, the palaces of Abraham in Yemen, the great cathedral he built, they are dust. You can barely find the ruins. But the voice of Bilal,
it is ringing out from minarets in New York, in London, in Timbuktu, in Jakarta, every single day. The man who was treated as a subspecies, worth less than an ounce of silver, is now the voice of a global civilization.
that is the power of this history. It reminds us that the people who seem powerless, the slaves, the refugees, are so often the ones who actually shape the future.
Well said. Very well said.
If you want to explore this yourself, the sources recommend reading Surah Al-Fil in the Quran. This is the short chapter about the elephant, or, digging into the history of the Aksumite Empire. It is a rabbit hole worth going down.
Absolutely. There's always more to learn.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.